Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time long ago, there was a little girl who liked to wear a red bonnet, whom everyone called Little Red Riding Hood. One day her mother was preparing food to put in a basket for Little Red Riding Hood to take to her grandmother, who was ill and living in a cottage in the middle of the forest. Once again, she cautioned her daughter, "There's a scary wolf who hides out around the path to grandmother's house. You must hurry along, don't wander off from the path, now." Dear Little Red Riding Hood promised, and carried the basket off from the house, staying right on the path, not realizing at all that the ravenous wolf was secretly watching. He wanted to catch and eat Little Red Riding Hood, but didn't dare eat her right there, because there was a woodcutter working nearby. After thinking it over, he went up to Little Red Riding Hood and said, "Hello, Little Red Riding Hood, where are you going now?" Little Red Riding Hood saw the wolf talking to her and smiling in a friendly way, so forgot her mother's words of warning, and answered truthfully, "I'm taking some food to my grandmother, who lives in a cottage in the forest." "Your grandmother's cottage is far away. So why do you have to go walking there to take food?" asked the wolf. "Because grandmother lives alone, and is ill, so doesn't have anyone to fix her food to eat," answered Little Red Riding Hood. Hearing that, the wolf secretly smiled an evil smile, thinking of a trick to fool Little Red Riding Hood, and then, if it's like that, Little Red Riding Hood, stop and gather some flowers to take to grandmother's too, dear. There are lots of beautiful flowers right around here, suggested the wolf. That's true. If grandmother sees flowers, it will make her feel refreshed, and she'll get better fast. Thanks a lot, Mr. Wolf. While Little Red Riding Hood was picking flowers by the path, the wolf said goodbye to her and hurried off straight down the path, quickly arriving at grandmother's cottage. Knock, knock, knock. The big wolf knocked on the door to the grandmother's cottage. "Who's there?" asked the ailing grandmother from her bed. The wolf disguised his voice to sound small and bright, answering, "It's Little Red Riding Hood, dear grandmother. Mother told me you were sick, and had me bring some food for you." "Why does your voice sound so husky, dear granddaughter?" asked grandmother. "Because I've walked so far. I'm tired and my throat is dry," answered the wolf. Hearing this, grandmother slowly walked up to open the door for Little Red Riding Hood, and there was the wolf. She was so startled that she fainted. The wolf wasn't interested in eating an old person, because the meat was too tough to chew, so he stuffed grandmother in a closet and took her clothes, bonnet, and eyeglasses, put them on, and got into the bed to wait for Little Red Riding Hood to get to the cottage. Knock, knock, knock. "Grandmother, it's Little Red Riding Hood. Just come in, dear granddaughter." "I didn't lock the door," answered the wolf, disguising his voice. Hearing this, Little Red Riding Hood opened the door and went in the cottage. "Mother made some food for you, grandmother. A lot of it, too. And I picked some flowers to give you, too. I'll go fix the food and put the flowers in a vase," said Little Red Riding Hood cheerfully. "But you don't have to do that, dear. grandmother hasn't seen to grandmother, dear," said the wolf, "you in so long, come up close stretching his paw out to beckon Little Red Riding Hood over." Little Red Riding Hood saw her grandmother's hand and wondered, "Grandmother, why do you have such big hands?" The big wolf quickly drew his paw back and answered, "The better to hug you with." "My dear," Little Red Riding Hood walked up close to the wolf and asked, "Grandmother, why do you have such big eyes?" "You with, my dear," answered the wolf. The better to see Little Red Riding Hood noticed the ears poking out from under the bonnet, and so asked again, "Grandmother, why do you have such big ears?" "The better to hear you with, my dear," answered the wolf. At this point, Little Red Riding Hood came close enough to notice the big, sharp teeth showing out from his mouth, so asked, "And grandmother, why are your teeth so sharp?" At this, the big wolf came out from under the covers and showed how huge he was, letting loose a resounding roar. "The better to eat you with." Little Red Riding Hood cried out in desperation, "Help! Help! The wolf is going to eat me up." The wolf was just about to make a meal of her. But the woodcutter had heard Little Red Riding Hood's screams, and so rushed in, chopping with his axe, and drove the wolf running off into the forest. Right then grandmother, who had recovered, walked out of the closet. Little Red Riding Hood was overjoyed that her grandmother was safe, too. So that evening grandmother and Little Red Riding Hood thanked the woodcutter by inviting him to eat dinner with them. And from that day onward, Little Red Riding Hood never dared to wander off, and never talked with strangers anymore. Finally, this story teaches you that do not trust strangers and always be careful.